What's up guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you're doing good. I'm super excited to show you guys today's video because this challenge has never been done before and it is completely insane. Imagine if there was a way to take one of the most frustrating biomes in the game, the swamp, and fill an entire Valheim world with it. No meadows, no black forest, no mountains, no plains, no mistlands, no ashlands, and no great north, just miserable, poisonous swamp. I've been making Valheim challenge videos for a while now, and this is a type of challenge that I've been dreaming of making for a very long time. But for the longest time, it seemed technically impossible. But I'm happy to say for today's video, I have finally figured out how to make this happen. So without further ado, this is the Valheim Swamp Only Challenge. Before I explain how any of this is possible and we get into the action, let's go through the goals and key challenges. The ultimate goal of this challenge is to defeat Bonemass. Literally, the whole map is swamp, so there are no other bosses present on the map. And the interesting thing is, because the whole map is swamp, rather than having a soft rule set like we normally do in a challenge video, we actually have a hard rule set in that so much stuff is simply not possible. And just to list a few things, for example, we won't be able to make any boats. There'll be no armor because you can't make a forge, no portals because there's no grey dwarfs, no swamp cube because there's no elder, no pickaxes because there's no Eikthyr, and we can't make a forge. Pretty much our only food options are going to be yellow mushrooms and regular mushrooms. So any other kind of food is pretty much off the table, and our only real weapon choices are going to be a level 1 club and a stone axe, because we're not even going to be able to level up our workbench. And bearing all of this in mind, glitches are allowed in this challenge. There's several reasons why I decided on this, but the most obvious one is that we don't have a swamp key, right? So we're gonna have to clip into a crypt somehow. And also, as a Valheim speedrunner and someone that's been doing challenges for a while now, there's actually a ton of really cool glitches that I don't usually get to show off because we do so much glitchless content. And considering we're completely breaking the game anyway by making it all swamp, the idea of just completely breaking the game open really excites me because I'll get to show off some really cool speedrun tech and unusual glitches people might not have seen before. This is also a good moment to mention, if you just want to see the raw gameplay of the challenge, I'm going to put a card in the top right now and a link in the description to a playlist of all of the live streams where I did all of the gameplay for this challenge live on stream. So if you just want to see the raw gameplay, or you don't believe me that I really did any of this stuff, check out that playlist and you get all of the raw unedited footage. But Nick, how is any of this possible?
Huh?
How can you even get a world to be filled with just swamp? Well, this is where the fun begins. So strap in, this video is about to get nerdy. To turn a whole Valheim world into swamp, I used a mod called World Gen Options. However, this mod doesn't actually just turn your whole world into swamp. As you can see here, what it actually does is allow you to configure variables for unique world generation. So with the mod installed, I then had to dive into the mod's config file. After exploring and scrolling through all of the config options for the mod, all the way down at the bottom, I found this section called switches. In this section of the config file, there's an option for every single biome in the game individually. And with this option, you can choose to replace each biome with any other biome in the game. So for meadows, I wrote swamp. For black forest, I wrote swamp. For swamp, 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 until my whole world became one giant swamp. And now it's time for the action. Now the mod was set up, I created a new character with an appropriate name and generated a new world, so I could begin the completely insane adventure of dealing with a world that was just one biome. The first thing I did was start gathering wood and a few stones so I could make a stone axe and a wooden club, but very quickly our first challenge became apparent: dealing with mobs. Right from the get-go, we were basically one shot to anything.
Du bist ein Noob, 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 Noob.
So every fight was this intense battle of dodging and getting in 1 or 2 hits, then dodging again and getting in 1 or 2 hits. More like playing Elden Ring than Valheim. With the skellies, it wasn't quite as bad because at least they're weak to blunt, so the club would kill them after a few hits. But with Draugrs, killing any enemy took some patience and a decent amount of focus to finish off, especially compared to playing the game normally. And this brings me onto the second thing we had to overcome, which was food. Remember when I said at the start we'd have red mushrooms and yellow mushrooms? Well, first off, red mushrooms, whilst present in the swamp, are actually quite rare, especially if it's your primary food source. So basically 90% of the time, we didn't even have red mushrooms because there simply isn't enough to go around. And as for yellow mushrooms, well, for those we'd have to actually find a crypt. So up until that point, they don't exist to us anyway. And even when they did, with no pickaxe, we can only really loot the entrance of a crypt. It's just as a few spawns of yellow mushrooms. And even though they do technically respawn, they take ages to do so, so it just wasn't worth waiting around for. Especially when you consider the fact that even with yellow mushrooms and red mushrooms, yes, at first we can take 1 shot from a Draugr because it gives you a total of 50 HP, but after just a few minutes, we're 1 shot to any Draugr again, which basically means that any food we can get is completely useless.
No, God!
So yeah, you know when I said that food was limited, I kind of take it back. Basically, we're using no food for 99% of the challenge. This brings me on to crypts. First of all, right from the beginning, crypts were harder to find than I anticipated. Hold that thought because we'll come back to this later. Once we found a crypt, we had to get inside. Now I know at this point, people are probably expecting a chair clip, but actually Finewood was also harder to find than you might think. Again, remember this, we'll come back to it later. So I used a door to clip inside. Door clips work by you placing a door at a really specific angle in a specific spot and then opening the door outwards from behind, then closing the door on yourself so that the door forces you through the wall, which clips you through the wall, and then you can just walk into the crypt. Once we went through the door or wall, we then had to just hope that there was some withered bones accessible via a room that wasn't obstructed by a scrap pile, because we can't make a pick, right? So any areas blocked by a scrap pile were inaccessible, or were they? Oh, this is also probably a good time to mention the fact that we actually got super lucky finding Bonemass, because we found a tower on the starter island that just happened to have his runestone on it. So that was really fortunate, as all we need to do now was gather the 10 withered bones to summon him and to get there, which yeah. So back to scrap piles. You know when I said were areas blocked by them inaccessible? Any areas blocked by a scrap pile were inaccessible, or were they? Turns out no. For this, I used a really cool new glitch that I discovered when the sitting log was added to the game a while back. The sitting log, turns out, is one of the few objects that is placeable in a dungeon. Doors and chairs are not, so door and chair clips won't work unless of course you're in a dungeon that has a door, which we're not. The way this clip works is if you place a sitting log on top of the ledge next to the crypt entrance and you place it facing outwards, you can then jump and sit on it, which causes you to partially clip through the ceiling. Then if you start to jump while standing up, you appear out of bounds above the crypt. From there, you can explore the whole crypt from outside, and even though you can't see in, these treasure rooms that are normally full of loot are easily identifiable from above due to their unique shape. Then we need to find a flat surface next to the wall of one of these treasure rooms so that we can clip back in. Here we place another sitting log facing the wall, and we place a stack of wood above it just in the right spot so that it blocks me from standing up, but it still allows me to sit on it. And then as we stand up and move forwards, the stack pushes me through the wall. And this is where it all went wrong. Remember when I said, first of all, right from the beginning, crypts were harder to find than I anticipated, or Finewood was also harder to find than you might think? Well, turns out they were. Using these strats to beat the challenge required me to find a lot of crypts and a lot of shacks with core wood. Why do we need more core wood? I'll explain that later on. But I found out during the stream that actually Valheim has a hard limit on the amount of swamp structures that applies to the whole world. All kinds of structures seemed really rare to me, and I had mentioned it on stream, and someone from the chat mentioned that it looks like the world generator will place a maximum of 400 crypts in a world. So those 400 crypts are probably spread out over all of your swamp world. Turns out he's exactly right. He even sent me a screenshot from the Bepinx output console to prove it. This really took the wind out of my sails, I have to say. I really felt like it was going against the spirit of the challenge. Why? Well, usually your Valheim world is populated with 8 biomes: meadows, black forest, swamp, mountains, plains, mistlands, deep north, and ashlands. So when you limit the total number of crypts to 400, this only applies to one biome. So that number is based on the swamp being 1 out of 8 biomes. So all those 400 crypts are packed into a relatively small space that makes them actually quite common. However, when your whole world is swamped, this basically means that crypts are 7 times rarer than usual. 7.
Bruh.
Because those same 400 structures are now spread out across the entire planet. That wasn't the plan for the challenge. The point in the challenge was that my whole world would be one giant swamp that was just like your swamp from your normal world, not some extra desolate wasteland swamp that no one in their right mind would ever play on. To be honest, the challenge could have been dead right here, but here's where Honey Badger comes in. Remember the guy from the chat that told me about this in the first place? Well, he goes by Honey Badger and is an awesome member of our community that's a mod on the YouTube channel and plays on the Patreon server. Turns out he's also a full-time C# programmer and he's been learning how to make Valheim mods. The next day after the stream, I had a message from him telling me that he'd actually made a mod that solves my problem and that if I wanted any changes to let him know. This was absolutely amazing. After exchanging a few messages, he sent me a few different versions of the mod, which basically just multiplies the amount of points of interest and crypts in the swamp by a certain number. So he sent me several different versions, turning the amount of structures up by various amounts. And after a decent amount of testing to see which one felt right, it turns out that just multiplying the number of points of interest by 7 creates one giant swamp that feels perfectly natural and just like your swamp at home with all the crypts and core wood we need. So thanks to Honey Badger for being an awesome member of the community and for saving the day. You're an absolute legend.
Thank you!
So back to core wood. Why do we need so much of this? Well, remember when we clipped into the treasure room? First of all, once inside, we hope that we find some withered bones. Once we do, we need to get out with those bones. The way we do this is similar to the way that we get out of bounds with the sitting log at the entrance. We place a sitting log on one of the ledges in the top corner of the room. The difference is that this is much harder to do because the ledge is a little obstructed. So you just need to keep spam clicking, making little micro movements with the mouse, hoping you find a spot where it works. Once you do, you jump up, and if you can't quite reach it, you can actually use a wood stack to help you get there. And once you do, you sit on it and jump out of bounds just like before, except this time we just jump into the abyss. This is a good time to mention something really cool about Valheim. It turns out that all dungeons in the game actually exist way above the overworld. So when you clip out of bounds and you jump off, you actually just come hurling through space and will eventually hit the ground somewhere outside the dungeon that you entered. For this, we can just die because we'll have a bed nearby. But just for fun and to save a little time, if we log out just before we hit the ground and then log back in again, we take no fall damage as the game no longer knows we're in the air, therefore cancelling the fall damage. Anyway, every time we do this, we leave whatever mats we used to clip out of the treasure room inside the crypt. And this is why we're going to need plenty of core wood. With the new mod installed, I generated a new world and created a new character with an even more appropriate name and started the challenge again. This time we were able to find all the withered bones and core wood we needed. However, there was one thing that was still a challenge: crossing the ocean. We're obviously going to need to cross the ocean to get to Bonemass. So the way I did this was by, first of all, swimming as far as I could until my stamina bar was empty. Then, before I started to lose health, I logged out and back in again, and when I relogged, I had full stamina. So then I just swam as far as I could again, and I rinsed and repeated this strat until we reached the other side. Eventually, with all of the techniques mentioned in this video so far, I was able to get to Bonemass, which brings us to the final section of the video: the boss fight. To beat Bonemass, I use another glitch that I never get to show off. We start by clipping into the skull using a chair. Then inside the skull, we craft a workbench with a roof so we can infinitely repair our wooden club. Then we summon Bonemass and make sure we clip into the skull and destroy our chair before he spawns in. If you do leave any structure outside the skull, he will attack it and probably destroy it and you in the process. Bonemass knows we're here, but he doesn't aggro because he can't actually see us. So he just moves towards us and kind of stands there. So from this position, we're able to just keep wailing on him with the club until our club is broken, and then we repair it and we rinse and repeat this process until Bonemass is defeated. This is quite simple, but you do have to make sure you don't expose any of your body through the skull, which is actually quite an easy accident to make because you can't see the skull from the inside. So the easiest way to make sure this doesn't happen is to stand behind the runestone as you're hitting him. And after a long and drawn out fight of doing very little damage, eventually we had success. Alright guys, that's just about going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. These challenge videos take an insane amount of time to put together. So if you would like to support me and help me make more, then you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/NickRawcliffe. And in return, you get access to a private Valheim server. I also just want to take a second to remind you guys that if you don't believe anything that happened in this challenge, or you would just like to see more gameplay footage of this challenge, there is a link in the description to a full playlist that shows all of the recording sessions of me doing the challenge live on stream. I do stream live on this very YouTube channel and live on Twitch, so I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in that, along with a link to the Patreon. Don't forget to leave a like and a nice positive comment for the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe for future content. You can join the Discord and follow me on social media at the links below. And until next time, have a good one.